Hi, everybody. I bet you don't know how long it takes for the FDA to make a decision on a study risk determination. For those of you that have no idea what a study risk determination is, we're going to cover that today. But the answer to that question is 75 to 90 days. Now, chances are the FDA is going to ask for a little bit more information. So you might get an interactive information request. So they send you an email, say, please send this additional information or make this change. And that might delay it somewhat, but it might not if it's interactive and you're able to provide the response quickly by email. But the other possibility is they put it on hold and they ask you to revise things, and that would extend it. But the goal is 75 to 90 days, so a little bit longer than a normal pre-sub. And you should have already done a pre-sub to review your clinical study protocol with the FDA before you're even submitting a study risk determination. But here we'll go into the slides and I'll explain it in more detail and show you the FDA's new pre-start template and exactly how you use it for study risk determinations. And this applies also to human factors studies, not just human clinical studies, but the primary purpose is human clinical studies, and I'll cover the human factor stuff at the end. Here we go. And I just realized I need to switch screens here. Slideshow from the beginning. Okay. And share the screen. Sorry about the not being as crisp as I would like it here. There we go. Okay, so we have the slide deck for everybody. And if you're having any trouble seeing anything, in our 510K course, this is one of the videos that we're going to have in there, and templates that we're going to have in there. I'm going to add it to the list. We've got a big, long list that's going on, but this is a new one that I created because the FDA created a new template for pre-stars. So it's somewhat pre-subs, Q-subs, but really that's not, it's a separate topic all itself. So here we go through the slides. So what is a study risk determination? Risk, we're not talking about necessarily any risk, so not cybersecurity risks and stuff like that. We're talking about specifically risk to human clinical study or in human critical studies, and risk to subjects, risk to health, safety, and welfare of those subjects. So it's specific to the subjects, not just anything. Risk, normally we could have it to security, HIPAA data, all these other things. There are lots of ways in a clinical study to protect other kinds of things like data. But this is, if we do this clinical study, could some of the subjects that enroll in this study get hurt? That's what we're most concerned with. And I've got a hyperlink there that you can see the whole entire hyperlink there. If you want to download it from our website, you just click on that link. That's the FDA's guidance document on how to do this. Now, if a lot of what we do is showing people how to do it themselves, because we know that medical device companies, when they're first starting out, they don't always have a lot of money. If you have the ability to write a clinical study protocol as a draft and submit it to the FDA as a pre-sub, you have the ability to do this. This is actually easier than that. So the pre-subs are slightly more complicated than the study risk determination submissions. They use the same template. Pre-star version 3.0 is the new version that goes into effect. The old one is expired on August 3rd, which is very soon. And you also had the ability to write the documents that they needed in that pre-sub, so you won't have any trouble with any of the documents that go in this. But the protocol that you were proposing and you made edits to after the pre-sub is one of the attachments. So that's a good indicator of whether this is within your wheelhouse of skill or not. If you have the ability to do a pre-sub and attach a protocol as a draft to the FDA and ask questions about it, then you have the ability to do this too. Okay. The risk categories, there's two risk categories. I'm going to say there's 2.5. The reason why I say there's 2.5 Non-significant risk is what most people want to be classified as. Not everything should be classified as non-significant risk, but sometimes things are so low risk that we call them minimal risk. So I'm going to say there's 2.5 categories. There's really only 2. The FDA only mentions 2. But when it comes to IRBs, which I'll discuss later, there's this special expedited category, and that's when minimal risk comes in. So you got to remember, non-significant risk or significant risk, that's what we're trying to get the FDA to say. They're not going to say minimal risk. If it's truly minimal risk, you didn't even need to fill out this form unless the IRB made you. And I'll discuss that as well. Now, non-significant risk, which is what most people want the FDA to say, so they don't need to submit an IDE and get it approved. The IDE doesn't cost you anything. You're just filling out another one of these pre-STAR version 3.0s. So it's not an end of the earth because it's an IDE study. It just means that you have to be getting the FDA's approval first. And since you're going to probably use the data for a submission, wouldn't you want the FDA's approval anyway? So what's really the big deal? You're just going to have to submit an ID, another gateway that you have to go through, or a gate that you have to go through to get the FDA approval. But you're going to do a pre-sub to get their feedback on the protocol. You're going to do a study risk determination to have them say it's IDE or significant risk instead of non-significant risk, and then you're going to get approval of your study. But if you think that this is a non-significant risk study, then you only need the IRB's approval. If you don't know what an IRB is, then you probably didn't do a very great job of your protocol either. But an IRB is an institutional review board. So it's the review board at, let's say, a hospital deciding whether you can conduct that clinical study here or not. They may want you to make changes to comply with their policies or make it safer for the subjects. They might be worried about HIPAA compliance. They might worry about a lot of different things about the way you've designed the study. But getting the IRB approval is mandatory no matter what risk classification it is. But if it's a significant risk, then you also need the FDA's approval in an IDE. So if it's non-significant risk, just the IRB. If you don't know what an IRB is and you're in Europe, think of it as an ethics review board. Very similar process, same kind of organization. So that's what an IRB is. If it is a minimal risk study, the risk of harm does not exceed the risk encountered in daily life or routine examinations. So when people go routinely to the hospital for blood work once a year for like cholesterol or blood sugar, they're going to draw blood. So I took a little picture here of a phlebotomist drawing some blood for a test. And that would be something that would be routine. So there wouldn't be any new risks if you're just drawing some blood. Now, if you had a new needle and you're investigating the needle, or you have a new vacutainer, or you have a new holder for it, that might be a different story. But if you're just drawing blood and the test or clinical study that you're doing has to do with the test, it's an in vitro diagnostic, it isn't even going to touch the patient. You're just pulling samples, specimens. So a blood specimen, a urine specimen, a stool specimen, a saliva specimen, those are all going to be routine things that are routine examinations or specimen collections. So those are not introducing any new risks. So therefore, we don't need to worry about this being something that the IRB needs to have a whole panel review. It can be just one person that's designated in the organization to review that. And also, not only do you need it to be minimal risk, but it has to fall within an established criteria defined by the Office of Human Research Protections, OHRP, which is another Health and Human Services .gov organization in the US. So that could be an expedited IRB review. If your IRB has an expedited review process, they can explain more about it to you. There's probably a simpler form that you have to fill out, and you might comply with it. But not everyone does. So a lot of IRB, IVD performance clinical studies would fall in this category. A lot of more invasive things like implants, never going to fall in this category. They're going to be in our significant risk category. Okay, Significant risk is the other risk category. It requires US FDA pre-approval of the IDE and approval by the IRB. The FDA comes first, and then the IRB comes. You have to show the IRB we got our IDE approval. They're going to want that documentation. And they may also, if you were going the other way and you were saying, we think this is non-significant risk, you're submitting it directly to the IRB, not the FDA, they could say, hey, you need to fill out a study risk determination request, submit it to the FDA, and get them to say that it's in writing before we can even review this. But if you're saying it's significant risk, then you're going to the FDA first, getting their IDE approval. So the request for designation request for determination of risk isn't needed because you're already saying it's the higher risk category. So if you're sure it's significant risk, the only reason why I can see somebody submitting it, thinking it's significant risk, wanting the FDA to say that, is because you've got investors that don't want it to be, and you got to convince them that the investors are wrong. It's the only way I can think of it. Or internally, you just have a disagreement. Some people say it is, some people say it isn't. Submit your protocol to the FDA in our study risk determination, and they'll tell you yes or no. And it's really not something that should be debated. It's usually fairly straightforward. If you're not sure what an IDE is and what the regulations are for an IDE, I'm going to be giving a webinar on that next week about IDEs, and I'm in the process of setting up one right now and submitting it to the FDA for one of our clients. And it is a significant risk study, so we have to get the IDE. We didn't have to submit a request for study risk determination because we know it's a significant risk study. We know it's a very invasive study that we're doing, and those regulations are down below there, but I'm going to be using the pre-STAR version 3.0 for submitting that. This slide here is a screen capture of one of the templates we use for this. Greg Chrysler, he's one of our consultants. He created this template when he did his first study risk determination for a human factors study, as a matter of fact, because the company wasn't sure whether it was non-significant risk or significant risk, so they wanted the FDA to weigh in on it, and the FDA said it's a non-significant risk study. But he created this simple table here that does a great job of going through, here are the four possible criteria that the FDA wants you to look at. Is it an implant? No, the product wasn't an implant. It didn't support or sustain life. It wasn't substantially important in diagnosing, curing, or treating a disease, and it didn't present any potential for serious risk to anybody. In fact, that particular study, it was a usability study where they were actually going to test people instead of just simulate testing people. There was the potential for somebody falling. But the people could have fallen just walking into the building because the disease that we were looking at was something that causes dizziness and falling. So if they're going to make it through this study, they're going to make it into the building with the same level of risk. So the FDA agreed non-significant risk study. So that was a great way of Greg getting an opportunity to learn a little bit more about our human factors process. He hasn't done one of our human factors studies yet, so that was an opportunity for him, and it gave me a little bit more experience doing study risk determinations. But he came up with a beautiful template here, and this table really says it all. You just fill in that right-hand column, and you're good to go. Now, can the IRB act alone? So this comes back to, if you think this is a non-significant risk, can the IRB go ahead and agree with you without you doing a study risk determination? They can. And I put that in orange. They can review it. So you don't have to do a study risk determination. But they would have to agree or disagree. And if they disagree, then you're going to have to go to the FDA and do an IDE. Okay? You may be required by the IRB to submit an official written FDA study risk determination because they don't want to take the risk. Or it might be the institutionals, the IRB's policy that we need a written study risk determination from the FDA. We're not going to take the risk of accidentally making decisions on something that's significant risk when you said it was non-significant risk. We don't want to take that risk. We want in writing the FDA is okay. with us approving the study without their reviewing it. So that's actually what happened in the case of that usability study. And then the last possible thing is a lot of people have the idea in their head that they're going to shop around and find the IRB that agrees with them that this is a non-significant risk study. Not a great idea. Think about this. We have a study, we have some lingering doubts about whether this is significant risk or not, and we're going to find an IRB that doesn't look too closely. Maybe that's not the best partner for you to be doing a clinical study with. You want somebody that looks at this with a lot of scrutiny and keeps you on the safe side of protecting your subjects in your clinical study. You don't want that risk. That's the whole point of all this, is to de-risk the process. So get the FDAs to do a study risk determination. Don't avoid it. If there's anything in the gray area, get the official in writing statement. It's a non-significant risk study. And the IRB will breathe a sigh of relief and can go forward. Now, what do you actually submit to the FDA? So this is the screen capture of the table of contents of that same document that I said Greg Chrysler created. And you just pick whether it's going to be significant risk determination rationale or significant, non-significant or significant. Which one it is, you delete the other one and you remove the highlight in the brackets. That's what you're going to do. And you update the table and then you're going to fill in each of those sections. So the template is only 4 pages. His final submission was like 7 and 9 pages, somewhere in there. The FDA's guidance for this is only 15 pages. So don't write a book. Concise and clear is your mantra. Concise and clear. That's what you want. So this is really easy to for the FDA to review and make a decision quickly, and then maybe you'll be closer to that 75-day instead of the 90-day. Next thing on here, Pre-Star version 3.0 organization. So I'm doing a screen capture now, and the next several slides are going to be all screen captures from the Pre-Star filled in for an actual request or study risk determination submission. And I completed the whole thing, so it's ready to go. But in this, as I said in previous ones, when you're going in the Pre-Star, always select display all options. And that way you can see all the different things you can submit and select the correct one, because some of them sound similar and you might accidentally pick the wrong one. I've done that once, and ever since I always hit display all options. And the thing that you would do in this particular case is it would be a study risk determination, and that's this one right here. And then down below you have a new application. If the FDA asks you to provide more information or revised information, then you'd have a second submission that would be another supplement, and you would click on additional information, and they would ask you for that Q sub number. But you don't need to do that, hopefully, if you follow this video. Okay, next slide. It's the next section. So I'm going sequentially through the Pre-Star. This looks just like any Pre-Star, just like any E-Star. They all look the same. You're going to have a cover letter and you're going to have the company contact information. If you click yes in the drop down at the very bottom of the form here on this page, this is like page 2 of the Pre-Star, then it's going to have a place for the consultant to put their information if they're the contact. If you're submitting it directly as a company, you're just going to fill out this top section and then you're going to have no. And this just happens to be a fake company, but the contact information is really Lindsay Walker, our director of sales, contact information. And that's not her real address. Don't go bugging people. We don't need stalkers. Next, we have the pre-submission correspondence and previous regulator interaction. So if you are doing a study risk determination, you're going to have to attach your protocol. You want to have had that protocol reviewed by the FDA. It shouldn't be the first time they've seen it. This should be at least the second time they've seen it. You should have taken action based on their feedback. So you want to attach at least the meeting minutes, and probably you're also going to have their email response. So you probably have 2 documents, their email response and the pre-submission meeting minutes. You could just have the email response if you asked for an email response and declined having a meeting. So their feedback was perfect. You don't have any questions. Cancel the meeting. Then you just have the email response. So there could be 1 document attached or 2 documents attached. And then you would have the Q sub number there, and this would normally be the supplement. If that last pre-sub was a supplement, then this is going to be the next sequential number up from that. So that's what you're attaching here. Okay, the next section right below that, they're going to ask what the submission characteristics are. So in this first section here, they're asking what you want to put here. So I put in a hypothetical example here of what we're doing. So a little bit, if you look at the top of the section right here, it says don't wake the baby. If you watch my tutorial on how to do pre-subs, it's a fake product that I invented. Actually, a couple of companies have come to me with something very similar, but the don't wake the baby product is a thermometer, a clinical thermometer, supposed to enable parents to check on the baby remotely. So instead of doing a spot check on the baby's temperature to see if their fever has gone down or it's getting worse or it's staying the same with a normal thermometer, instead this is a remote thermometer, so the thermometer measurement part stays on the baby as a wearable, and then it reports wirelessly to your iPhone or your Android phone. That was the concept. Why? Because any parent that's had a baby with a fever, you get them to sleep, you do not want to wake them up to see if the fever's down. That means opening up the door and they instantly wake up. You touch them, you put the thermometer there, it beeps, it wakes them up. Now, you don't want to wake the baby. They just fell asleep. But you don't want them to stay sleeping if they've got a fever that's getting worse. You want to take them to the hospital. So that's the idea behind this product. Very simple, straightforward. Every parent has been there. So that was the idea behind this. And we say we want to do a clinical study protocol. And you're submitting it to Health Canada. And you'd like feedback on it before you do it in the US. And you would also do it in the US, probably not just Canada. And you want to get this feedback. And you want to know whether it's a significant risk study or not. So that's why you would do this. And remember, this is all hypothetical. The name of the study, I came up with a very simple, straightforward name for the study. You do not have to get fancy in study names. It doesn't really help you explain to people what it is. So I came up with Wearable Infant Thermometer Study. I could have called it the Don't Wake the Baby Study, but that could have been anything. Nobody knows what that is, but Wearable Infant Thermometer Study? Okay, I understand that. And by the way, every single clinical thermometer out there that is going to be 510K cleared in the US has to have a clinical study showing accuracy. And you need a certain number of patients that are feverish, febrile. So you would have to do a clinical study, but it would probably be a non-significant risk study. So it would be very common for somebody to be submitting one of these studies to the FDA or one of these forms to the FDA to make sure it's a non-significant risk study before they get the IRB at the hospital to approve it, because where are you going to get a whole bunch of feverish babies? Either your pediatrician or you're going to go to the hospital, or both, because you need multiple sites. So what are you going to attach? The most important documents in the whole entire submission are on this section. It's the two green things that are attached there. One is the rationale, Greg's template. It's filled in. It's only going to be a handful of pages. It's a 4-page template. Maybe it's going to be 7 or 10 pages when you're done. 15 absolute max, because not because the FDA said so, because their own guidance is only 15 pages. You just don't need to write that much. Clear and concise. And then the second thing is you're going to be your protocol. That could be very much longer. That could easily be 30, 40, 50, 70 pages. And you're going to have all kinds of attachments that might be embedded into the PDF, or it might be separate PDFs. So there could be multiple documents attached there. You're allowed to do that in these pre-starts. But you need the clinical study protocol, and you need your rationale for why it's non-significant risk. Okay, so product description, this is going to be like every other pre-sub and every other E-star, and that's why you can export and import it into the next submission you do, whether it's another pre-star supplement, whether it's an IDE, or whether it's going to be a 510K or a de novo. No matter which one it is, you can just export it out of here, use the little feature at the end, and then import it into the next submission you're doing. Now, the description section is next after that. That's where you attach the device description. You have to have a device description, if you're doing a pre-sub, whether you're doing a 510K, whatever it is, you have to have one, and you usually keep those under revision control. I have our template here, but you're going to have to create your own, and it's going to have pictures and lots of detail in it. And that's usually one of the biggest problems is we don't have enough detail. Next, you have the indication for use. This is formerly known as FDA Form 3881. We don't actually attach the Form 3881 anymore, though it does exist. In rare cases, you use it for an additional information request or something. But this is what you have, and they added the little section at the bottom that tells you what age cohorts are involved. And for this product specifically, it's supposed to be babies that have just gotten home and they're under 2 years of age. So the infant category, not neonates, because the reason why I specifically was thinking this would be a bad idea to test this product on neonates is because it probably is going to have an adhesive. And you take an adhesive and you put it on a neonate or a newborn, you're going to peel off skin if you're not really careful. So we don't want to have that risk. Thinking about risk here. So we're going to test this product out on infants. The hospital wants to do a test on newborns. They're not going to do it with the don't wake the baby thing. They're just going to pull out their thermometer and they're going to test the baby in the NICU. They're not. So that's what this product is for. It's for that specific age group, the small little ones that are in your crib at home. And then at the end of the form, we're already, if you look there, that was page 7. Now we're on page 8 and 9. We're already there at the end of the submission. It's only a 9-page document. We're looking at page 8 and 9 here. In 9, you can see the export button, the import button, and there's nothing on this side. If there was stuff over here, it would tell me I have more work to do. If everything's over here, that means all the sections of the submission are complete and it's ready to submit. And the other way I know that is at the very top of the document, it'll say that this submission is complete and it's ready to submit. Now, if you wanted to see what are in the attachments, so what attachments I need, I only have 5 attachments. You might end up with 6 if you had email response from the FDA for a pre-sub and the pre-sub meeting minutes. You could even have more if you had multiple pre-subs. You could have a bunch of attachments giving more details about the device, but minimum, you're probably going to have 5 attachments. So if I were going to expect more, it'd be more meeting minutes and more detail on the device description, like attachments of photos and things. But this could be all you've got. And I included the description column so you would see where it gets attached in the submission. And you can see all but my device description template are very recent, and the size of these files are really small. Okay, so then after you've done all this, it saves as a PDF document, one single PDF document, no more nested zip files, just one PDF. It's an E-star, actually a pre-star, only version 3.0 after August 3rd, and you attach it here in the customer collaboration portal. And if you have trouble submitting this, just contact us. We submit these all the time, and we can help you set up an account if you haven't done that before. And on our website, we have a link for where you can get an account to do your own submissions. Okay. If you are wondering what's in our 510K templates for the request for designation, here's the screen capture of the whole entire folder, and I even showed you the export here. I exported out of our tutorial one, which was version like 1.3. Yeah, 1.3. And then I imported it into 3.0, so it exports and imports no problem. And the latest version, 7.0 and 3.0, work fantastic. No more delays that we were having before. So knock on wood here. That usually starts going bad after a couple months. So hopefully it'll stay working well for a while. But that's an Adobe bug issue, than not anything else. But here's all the templates that we've included here. So we got label, IFU. You don't absolutely have to have these, but you can. The thumbnail, that's just the thumbnail I use to create the slides. You have the rationale, that's Greg's template. You have the significant risk determination, that's the PDF guidance from the FDA. This is the pre-star that I filled out and showed you in this presentation. The export file, my slide deck, so you get my native slide deck. The cover letter, so you have a cover letter template you can use. The device description, one with all kinds of instructions, one that's a clean copy without as many instructions. And then our clinical study protocol, that normally only comes with our clinical study procedure. So you're actually getting a sneak peek into one of the most important documents in our clinical study procedure. So that sells for $299. This sells for $299. And if you get this, it has all of our 510K stuff. There's over 30 webinars there. So that currently is the only way you can get this request for study determination. But if you put comments down below and say, this was awesome, I'd like to buy this. If you would like that, we're going to sell it for 99 bucks. But only if we get comments down below and say, it should say, Becca, please put this on Thinkific. So if you're wondering what Thinkific is, here, I'll show you. Here's Thinkific. I know I'm jumping out of order here. Thinkific here is, I put the hyperlink at the top. This is our human factors training program, and it's our first paid program on this platform. Becca did all the work for creating Thinkific platform that we licensed, and eventually it'll be mdauditor.com instead of mdauditor Thinkific. I just need to do some redirecting. But if you would like us to add this study risk determination as a $99 product, just put down in the comments below that you want Becca to do that, and we'll take care of that. If I don't see any comments below, I'm not going to waste Becca's time. So that's the only way you're going to get less expensive access, 99 bucks, instead of buying our whole 510K course for 1,400 something. So then I'll go back here. Usability studies is the next thing that I wanted to cover. So I had talked about at the beginning, usability studies. Do you need study risk determinations? That's one of the questions that people ask. But I'm going to go through the most common questions that we get. Number one, is the FDA IDE approval required? So if you are doing a simulated use study, not an actual use study, no, an IDE should not be required because it's not actually going to treat any patients or put any of them at risk. If it is, you've done a really poor design of a simulated use study. Could you? Yeah, you could determine if it's required and you could get an IDE approval, but you would submit a study risk determination, which is what this whole video is about, asking the FDA if an IDE's approval is required or not. And if it's a simulated study, probably not, and you'd have it in writing, and that would make everybody happy and feel like there's less risk and they're not doing something wrong. The next question, is IRB approval required? Well, some institutions say absolutely, that institution says you need our approval before we're going to let you do that study here, even if it's simulated use. If it's an actual use study, absolutely you're going to need IRB approval, and it's a non-significant risk study in all likelihood. So you have to ask the IRB if that's required or not to do that study at that location. If you're not doing a study at an institution, if you're doing it at a simulation facility that we normally work with, then probably not, because they don't have an IRB, and because you're not putting anybody at risk. There's not really anybody saying, company bad, you're not supposed to do that. It's a non-significant study, and there is no institutional IRB to get approval from. Could you go get your own independent IRB? Yes, you could. And you could have them review it. And if you want your investors to feel more comfortable and the patients and subjects to feel more comfortable, even though it's simulated use, you could do that. But you probably don't need to. It's probably not required. Now, trick question number 3. Is an RFD required? There are so many acronyms out there. It's so easy to get confused. This is not a request for designation. A request for designation is what RFD is. Request for designation is, does this submission go to the device side of the FDA or the drug side of the FDA? And that's a question you ask when you're submitting a combination product, and you ask that question formally in writing to the Office of Combination Products. That's not what this video is about. You got confused by an acronym. Even though the R and the D are applicable here, this is a study risk determination, not a request for designation. Different acronym, doesn't apply here. But do you need a study risk determination? That's what this whole thing's about. If you are doing a simulated study and it doesn't have an IRB and you're convinced it's non-significant risk, no, there's no requirement. Should you? Would you get benefit from it? Yes. And if you're going to do it in a hospital, probably. And is liability insurance required? Well, insurance is required in certain countries like Europe. All the member states under the MDR are required to have liability insurance, even for their clinical studies. And you have to indemnify the other organizations that are involved, like your notified body and your authorized representatives. But if you're doing it in the US, the most litigious country in the world, we don't have a requirement for that. You can do stupid things and you'll get stupid results. So go out there and don't get insurance if that's your thing. But I have a slide up for you here later that you might want to go watch that video before you make that dumb decision. Okay. Usability services. If you need help with the usability study, Matthew and I did a video about this. We actually have a page built just for this. Go watch our video on YouTube about usability services, or go to our website, Medical Device Academy, type in the search usability services, and you will find this page, and there's a form to fill out to get a quote, and Lindsay will send you a quote. And we already covered this slide. Like I said, say, Becca, please put it on Thinkific, $99. But if I don't see any comments down there, we're not doing it. And the liability insurance, if you're interested in asking questions about liability insurance, this is the person to talk to, not me. So type in our website, liability insurance, and you'll find the same kind of thing. A video, there was an interview with me and Jeff Hellman, and you can also fill in the form there. You don't have to have me fill it in for you or one of our team. You can fill it in yourself. And then Jeff will follow up with you and tell you about what they do for insurance, including clinical study insurance. And it's a lot less expensive than you might think to get clinical study insurance. And that would include these kinds of things that you would do for study risk determinations. So there's my contact information. Every Thursday at 12:30 Eastern time, we do these live stream. Next week is going to be about doing an IDE using Pre-Star version 3.0. And if you have any questions or suggestions for future topics, please put it in the comments below. Or ask Becca, hey, I want it on Thinkific. I want it for $99 because I don't want to pay $1,400 something for the whole 510K course. If you already have the 510K course, it'll be there shortly. Bye-bye.